Hasbro, it seems like they're wanting to get out of the toy business. We wiped all that stuff clean.
Then it just took off. I think the independent companies are giving a better product.
Who wants to keep on buying the same stuff? Fill a little bit of those voids. I'm not a toy collector.
Guys, I think we're flooding the market. I think it's too much. I think the independent companies are giving a better product.
It's a really good time to be an independent toy maker.
So both of our businesses, we deal with collector products. That's just how it all evolved. But I mean, you've been in it so much longer than I have. Does it surprise you how the collector wave and the collector market kind of evolved and how it keeps, kind of going up and more is coming out?
It's fascinating. To be honest with you, I'm not a toy collector. I don't, and 9 times out of 10, I defer to other guys on the team, Jeremy and Eric and CB. They've been collectors for years and they understand how that works. But I do find the dynamics of it very interesting because we as Four Horsemen went through, obviously the Mattel days where we were, interacting with most of the time, the early time were the He-Man fans, the Massive Universe people, and then the DC stuff. So you saw how those people, their little group, reacted to the stuff that Mattel was doing and what they're thinking. And then the DC people were a little bit different. And then our people are completely different than any of those other people, at least in my mind, because we bring a little bit more to the table than most of the, just the average collecting. At least I feel we do. I think in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been an evolution of people doing like photography and customizing has gotten huge. It used to be there were people who could weather like things or bloody splatter or whatever they wanted to do. But now people are doing these customized, and our stuff is just very easily brought into that world of customizing. And then you make these beautiful customs, and then either you or someone else is going to create these beautiful dioramas and photograph them.
Yeah.
And with people sharing and doing all this stuff, it's interesting. I don't know if the timing is, would this have existed with all the technology and all where we are? Could you go back in time with the DC and the Master stuff? I think you could, but I don't think people would be invested like they are now.
Yes.
See, what I like about what I like about Mythic and Cosmic and what we're doing is it allows people a certain amount of ownership of their stuff.
100%.
Like we always were constrained with Masters or DC of certain colors, certain looks, so of course the people who collected it, and rightly so, they wanted their correct version of the characters they wanted. And they were not really as accepting of the variant, the mind-created thing. They liked it, but that wasn't what drove them to buy this. We wiped all that stuff clean. So now when you buy these figures, they're also, you can you customize it yourself, and it really is yours. It's not as much as that iconic figures, the He-Man, this,
Batman,
all that stuff. So that's the short answer.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny you say, like, could it have existed back then? Because when I was at Hasbro, I think this is 2016 or 2017, and they were like hammering collector stuff. And I said, guys, I think we're flooding the market. I think it's too much. And I was wrong. And it's like, I'm glad I was wrong because like, you know, I have a business now that prospers from it. But seeing it then, I just thought it was too much doing 6-inch and 3 3/4 and 12-inch and prop replicas. But everyone saw the consumer base said we wanted more. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, then when I left and I started when I'm starting, I mean, I went down the road you guys paved. Like you guys paved it for me. And it's like, I saw what you guys were doing with like how the item can live on its own. But if you want to customize, you can customize. And I was like, that's what I want Action Force to be. So I just kind of copied the recipe that you guys put out there. And when I came to, I think it was like ZoloCon a couple of years ago, so many of the Horsemen customers were coming to our booth and buying our stuff. And I was like, that's a really cool overlap. And I think there's so many people that appreciate like what we do to be able to give them something that they can make their own. Whereas you buy Legends and Black Series and Classified, it kind of is what it is. So that's nice. And then when I came to Legions Con last year for the first time, I didn't know, I'd never been there, so I didn't know what to expect. And then when I walked in and saw that it was like a customizer's haven, I was like blown away by the work that people were doing. And I was like, this is amazing. Seeing how far it's come and seeing the talent that people have. Like the photographer that I use for my packaging now, he's got a day job. He works, I think, at a law firm, and he's also like a trainer and stuff. And he was doing figure photography on the side, and he was really, really good. And I just messaged him. I said, hey, you know, I'd love to do, you know, some shots with you. And it turns out he was right in Connecticut. So he was only an hour away. He'd drive up, he'd shoot there. And now he's getting work from, you know, Playmates and all these other companies. I'm like, that's great that like these guys, their talent is getting seen, and, you know, it's helping them expand too. So it's like not just the figure aspect of it, but these talented people are getting, you know, recognized for what they do because of the stuff that we kind of put out there. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, one of the things I ask people most, I always ask them, like, when did you start collecting, you know, our stuff? But I always ask them, what's your day job? Yeah. Like, what do you do? Like, and how it works in. And it's very interesting on how people, you know, it's some of how we got some of our employees, you know. Jeremy was had marketing background, was working with marketing, but not something that he loved. Mm-hmm. And the opportunity to market something that he loved was a perfect fit, you know. It's interesting. I think in many ways, your path and our path are kind of the same.
Sure.
And you started, you know, you had a little experience with a small company. Mm-hmm. And I know that for sure because the small company you were at was me for a couple of weeks or a couple of months that you came in and painted and stuff like that. Yeah. And then you went to Hasbro, which is a more, you know, corporate thing. And we kind of went through the same thing. And I look back and like, because I always try to figure out like what's the secret sauce? Like what did we do to get to this point to meet all these super cool people? Because over the years I've met the most awesome people all over the country, you know. They all have these little pockets, and someone told me today I'm going to steal their little comment, but he said they were all little sleeper cells.
All right,
you know, and they're all over the country, and they just need to be activated. Like we're going to go up to Mesquite-Con and go to Michigan, little Muskegon, Michigan, and meet up there. And up there's 100 and something people that just love this stuff and have a great time. Yeah, and you know, and then there's the North Carolina crew and the California crew. And I'm sure there's hundreds of other little crews that get together. And to me, that's the most exciting part of this part of the business, you know?
I love coming to shows because it's like you get to meet the fans, you know, and there's so many people that come to shows that we do all over. And I see them at every show. I'm like, that's great. Or someone told me this morning, like, I drove all the way from Ohio to come here to get, you know, your exclusive and stuff. I'm like, that's really cool.
I've been so blown away on those.
Yeah. But like, I get a lot of messages from people out West Coast, California. When are you going to come to California? When are you going to come here? Come down to Florida? You know, because I don't, you know, I'm like, you know, traveling and getting all the stuff to the show and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I was like, I don't know, you know, but people, those sleeper cells are out there. Someone told me the other day, they're like, there's a big like splinter cell or sleeper cell of fans in Puerto Rico. They're like, we meet, we have Action Force stuff, we get it, we customize it, we trade it, and this. And I'm like, that's really cool. They're like, you should come down to Puerto Rico. I was like, well, okay, so it's fun. It's I never had expected this to be what it was, because I just thought, okay, when I left Hasbro, I would just go work for another company, and I did. I got a job at Jazzwares, and I thought I would just do this on the side. It would just be something small, and then it just took off. I was like, wow, I could like make something of this, and it's only because of the fans. They're great and they're so supportive, and it's like, okay, I'll if you like it, I'll keep making it. Yeah, it's really crazy. But where do you see it going from here? Because that's I always have theories about that.
You know what? When we hit some of these times like now, where there's a lot of uncertainty, pricing or whatever, I feel I have some confidence, because I think the people that are collecting our stuff, they're going to do what they can to continue. I mean, that's the goal for us, to make it so, some of those other options, maybe buying more Black Series stuff, maybe they'll cut back on that. And they'll continue to. So I think it'll ebb and flow, but I think that it will continually, gradually go up, because as people will go to shows and they'll buy like one checkout. Like I've never heard of Valaverse. I've never heard of Mythic. They pick up one. If it's usually a 2-day show or 3-day show, you'll see them come back again, and then they'll buy 6 or 8. Yeah. But if they just go home, then they start doing a little bit of research, and they're like, wow, this is a really nice figure. And they enjoy it. And so it will continue. I don't, we're hitting a tough time right now, but I'm very confident, things will work their way out. I don't think people will abandon their joy. And that's good for guys like us, because we've put in that time to that community. And that to me, that's always been like the little gem on the side of success, is that building that community. Yeah. Because I think in the future, I mean, this is on my own, as people become more and more fractured in society, whether it's, at home, let's face it, we don't all have family gatherings like we used to and stuff. So people become more and more fractured across the board. It's just how life goes. But through those fractures, you need to fill a little bit of those voids.
Of course.
So that comes in many different manifestations. Yeah. Some food, some of those voids. And one of the voids is, collecting and action figures and Valaverse and Mythic and some of these other little smaller companies that become a little bit more comforting to people than the Hasbro. And let's face it, I mean, I've been saying, and I'm not the right person to, but I was saying this 10 years ago, who wants to keep on buying the same stuff? I don't know where the energy comes or the excitement for some of this stuff that's been out.
Oh yeah, I agree.
In many different versions, many different, price points and whatever, so I think it's a really good time to be an independent toy maker.
I agree.
And I think that, what we're doing now is really setting the stage for the bigger picture. Yeah. I mean, when you have a company like Hasbro, I don't follow them or anything, but I see some things that it seems like they're wanting to get out of the toy business. They're
seems
not
that way.
Right. So when you see that, you have to say to yourself, gee, it probably isn't as lucrative, that manufacturing and producing that product for these people, for a giant company like Mattel. They would rather, be in the licensing company at this point. Yep. So that's got to tell you something. Have they given in to the independence? To a degree, yeah. I mean, I think they're like, at a certain point, we might not want to compete with that collector market or whatever.
Yeah. I have some friends still at other companies, and they're like, man, I follow what you do. Like, you're so lucky you get to like kind of just do what you want. I was like, it is nice. It is nice to have the freedom to say, well, I can do this. Yeah. All right, I'll try it, see if it works, see if a vehicle works, see if this kind of figure works.
And the beauty, and also it's the fact that it's a non-licensed product.
Mm-hmm.
We're able to take that extra, and that's why things look better for the price.
Yep.
Mattel, I remember the early days of them. They would do a figure and it would be broken down by each paint hit was a half a cent here, a half a cent there. If it went a penny more than they in their price structure, that's it. It was, they eliminated it.
Yep.
It did, because they needed all that money to pay the overhead, pay everything. So we don't have to think that way. We have to think that way,
of course,
to a degree.
Yes.
But it's nowhere close to that. And then we get the crazy licensing fee. We throw that into the figure. And I think you're probably in the same boat as us. And this is what, right now, the tariff issue. We try to get the price as low as possible because we want customer. We negotiate with the factories to get that lowest price where we can survive, make some, and grow and reinvest. But it doesn't, it doesn't allow for that kind of price increases. There. So, I just touch on that. But
I can remember my times at Hasbro. It's like I never did an item that didn't have to get cost reduced at some stage. And again, I remember just you get the deco count from the factory, and I'm like, all right, where can I pull? All right, let me shave a couple deco hits here, a couple deco hits there. And I was actually thinking about it the other day. I was like, man, I haven't had to do a deco reduction in quite a while, just because I tend to know where my prices lie. But again, we don't have that variable margin window, like that Hasbro variable margin window where it's like, it has to be here. So it's like, if one figure, the profit margin is just a little low, but you're like, God, that figure looks really good. You can kind of eat it because other figures are higher or lower. And it's a nice system. And, it's kind of too bad that the big companies can't do it. Because sometimes you see products. I worked on tons of products over the years at Hasbro where you saw the final product and you're like, man, it was such a better product if they just gave a little more. And it got watered down or dumbed down or something like this. Now it's like we have the freedom to make what we want. And I look at what, Hasbro and Mattel are putting out at, say, that $30 to $40 mark at the collector range. And then I look at our stuff and it's like, you guys have a ton of stuff and soft goods. And I try to put a ton of stuff and accessories. And you're just like, wow, like we're as far as an offering goes, we're up here. They're down here. Yes, they have the good licenses and nostalgia and that sort of thing. But I think the independent companies are giving a better product.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah. Because of all those things, I can't imagine ever being in some kind of meeting in a Hasbro, Mattel, or something like that, where they would be concerned about lowering the price to bring more customers in. Mm-hmm. That's mainly how we always think. It's like, if we can get that price down low enough, people can buy X amount for $100.
Sure.
Like companies like Hasbro, they don't think that way. It's like, this is what we're targeting, this price, and this is what we can give to that price and no more. So yeah, I agree. And I think people, like anything else, you become more, conscious of what you're buying,
of course,
of what your value you're getting for your dollar. Mm-hmm. If you can get past the licensing thing and be a little bit more open to, this type of thing, like we do Cosmic, which I think Cosmic has so much potential as a sci-fi. Yeah. You go into that. Mythic is cool but there's a little bit of things you can, do, but you go to sci-fi and it's wide open. Yeah. But the problem with sci-fi is it's, Star Wars guy.
Yeah.
I'm a Star Trek guy. Babylon 5 dude. All these different ones. And they're kind of like, but if you can open your mind a little bit, the creativity that you see in these new characters and stuff like that. I've seen more stuff that's not necessarily like super niche stuff now, all over for pretty decent prices, like $65 figures. They're loaded with a ton of stuff.
Well, I mean, I think it's like how you guys built, Mythic. It's like Mythic, you've been doing that for at least 10 years, right? 10 years. Yeah. But Cosmic has been around a couple of years. I think it'll build the way Mythic did. I mean, I look at, going back, like thinking back to that museum show that I went to when you guys were doing it. And it's like how you started with like the Gothropolis stuff. And then it's like seeing how it all evolved into like what Mythic has become. And I'm like, Cosmic can definitely get there.
Yeah. I mean, the fun part now is now that we've kind of got these established things and we've got a little bit more personnel at work to kind of dedicate more time, and we're dedicating more to fill out the stuff that, the comic book and more of the story and the character development, things like that. That's the fun part.
Yeah.
That's the fun part of what we do.
Speaking of fun, did you ever think you'd do a dragon?
Yeah.
Like I'm sure it was probably always like tossed around the idea of it, but now like you're in it and you're do you look back and like we're doing a dragon?
Yeah, I mean it's going to be like an iconic toy figure because of the size of it, and the people that we have that we met with them. It was last year around this time. We met with our Chinese manufacturers and started showing them like we had even reduced size prints that we were showing them and trying to figure out like the mechanics of how it would work and stuff like that. So it's been in development for quite a while. So I'm very confident that we can, move along with the tooling. It's a huge tooling project, but the end result I think will be amazing. And I think, something like that'll be, something we that's a huge project.
Yeah.
And nice that we get something like that done because it'll allow us to probably do more and more of that kind of thing.
That was going to be my next question was, do you see it like, with the HasLabs and the other Kickstarters going on, people are doing these enormous projects, big undertakings. Do you see like more of that coming?
I think, I think the like the event type of thing, like because we've done it for years with Castle Grayskull and Snake Mountain and some of these bigger projects that were, I got to tell you, back in the old days doing that Castle Grayskull, we're a little bit behind the times as far as scanning technology and the printing and all that stuff. We're behind the times, but I look back and say that was a lot of good training and a lot of good, our thing was when we're doing that, it was hard to get real-time feedback as far as your sculpting, because printing was a different issue. Like you take the STL file and you'd be practicing and like, I want to get that printed out. You'd send it to somebody. They charge you a ridiculous amount and it'd be like, oh, I can't be doing that all the time.
Right.
But when those inexpensive printers started to come in, then we could do it, and you had a little bit more confidence in the real-time sculpting of what you were doing. You could see it the next day because you could print it and be like, oh, that needs to be a lot deeper to get the look I want. Back in the old days, it was like, well, that's what I saw. You show me a month later what it actually looked like. And it's like, that's why that original Castle Grayskull, did that, but then we sculpted the entire thing on top of that in clay.
Okay.
And then made these giant it was just, when I think back of it now, the amount of hours and the amount of work that we don't have to do nowadays because of that. So it makes it a lot easier. And I hope to do more of those kind of things because they are like event type things.
Yeah. You just made me remember, I have an old trunk that I have just like art supplies and stuff for when I was doing comics. But what I have in there is a hunk of Castelline. So you guys don't know, this guy gave me a chance when I was a student. I went there to do some painting work for you guys. And I remember asking, Eric, hey, I want to get into sculpting. And, Hasbro was using wax. You guys were using Castelline. And I thought Castelline was a much better product. And Eric gave me a chunk of it. He's like, here, practice on this and stuff. And I still have like that chunk of Castelline. And like to see, like, I think back, I'm like, man, it didn't feel like that long ago. Like that was like 2011. But I'm like, wow, that's quite a long time now to think back. Yes. But it's like to see how the improvements the toy industry has made with production as far as like behind the scenes stuff, like going from wax and Castelline to 3D printing. And then not just that, look at the deco applications. Look at what they're doing with the inkjet printing on the faces. I'm like, this is crazy. And I look back on some of the items I worked on at Hasbro. I'm like, if we had that technology then, this could have been a better item. So I start thinking like, all right, well, I feel like we're at the top here. Like it can't go any higher than this, right? But it's like everything always evolves. So it's like, well, what is the evolution? Like what's next for toy production? And I try to like think about that. And, I'm like, well, I'll just wait and see when it gets there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, because, you think back, like you went from, McFarlane to doing the Horsemen stuff. You worked with Mattel. It's like, you've seen it all, So it's like, where do you see it like going as far as production goes?
Production, I mean, they... From what I saw when I was over there, they have the same challenges we have, as far as getting qualified people to work and doing these kind of would be considered lower tech factories. People want to work in a more high tech factory. They're more comfortable and all the rest of it. So they're doing a lot more automation is how they're, like you said, the printed heads and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's a hard question to answer as far as like where, I mean, a lot of it's going to be more just able to do like super detailed things that we were never able to do before because of this printing now that they just, they can print directly right on the actual figures.
Yep.
It was a crazy machine I saw. They got like about, I don't know, maybe 150, 200 heads.
Yeah. And
they print 7 times. So it's 3 times across the front, 3 across the back, and once on top. So, they were some of their issues, and we know people, we put washes on figures and dry brushes and things like that. There's a bit of an issue with consistency with that because you're literally taking a rag or whatever, dipped in a little bit of paint and whatever. So the first one is 1,
heavy
2, 3, 4, 5, and maybe 5 or 6. You're light, and then you So there's that variation. So to go in and start printing, shading, and print. So that may bring even more dimension to the figures because then you're able to basically being custom airbrushing figures and stuff like that,
The one
from print.
Yeah. The one thing I was trying to get some of my factories to look into is you see the hydro dipping.
Yes.
And I'm like, because I have, the military figures with multiple layers of camo on it. So it's like if I do a 2 or 3 color camo, that's multiple tampo prints, for one color. And then you go around the leg, it's another color, and around for the third color. I said, guys, can we look into hydro dipping? And I think it's still kind of new out there, or at least for toys. I think they're doing it on other stuff, but I see what they're doing. I'm like, if you put the camo down, you can just take a tray, almost like they do the inkjet, put 100 thighs, dip it all, and boom, and I'm like, so it's little things like that. I always try to keep my eye on like, hey, can this process work over there and stuff like that?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, they are working on process to make things faster and hopefully cheaper, or at this point to stay consistent with prices, as prices rise, if they can do things quicker, we can keep a little bit of levelness to it.
Yeah. It was impressive because I went over to China for the first time ever about last year in May or June. And it was impressive, like seeing the factory, seeing the injection molding machine, seeing the whole process. And, it's like I'm sitting there and some of the factory workers are working. I'm like almost sitting with them, like looking, and they're looking at me like, who's this guy? I'm like, this is so like, I love every aspect of the development process. So I'm really like into it. It was very cool just to see, that all those different processes and see how certain ones are handled differently in spray masks and printing and that sort of thing. It's pretty wild.
It's a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
I knew there were aspects of it, but when you take into account the development as far as obviously the tooling, that's number one, but the amount of spray masks and they have to plate these figures to make the masks and then cut the masks, and it's the making the blisters and the plating of the inner molds for the blisters. It's just it goes out like a spider web from what you're getting. You think it's all done at the factory, and then you'll go somewhere where there'll be a place where they do the spray masks, and there'll be another place where they're doing something else, and they bring it all together. There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
And to figure, you're doing that same kind of thing for like when we do these lines of figures, 6, 8, 10 figures at a time sometimes, crazy enough to do those numbers. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. And, you say, oh, the tooling and the development is, about a year. It seems like a long time. But when you really look at it, you're like, wow, that's pretty damn good.
It goes fast because, you're working on, you kick something off and they're going into production, but you're working on concepting other things. And then you're working on something else. And before you know it, you're getting EP samples. And you're like, oh, wow, that was fast. I feel like, that I just turned that around yesterday, but it's been 4 months. And, that's always the fun part is when you start seeing it come to life. Yeah. You're getting those test shots.
Absolutely.
It's like, shoot, man, I can't imagine what it's going to be like when you guys get test shots of the Dragon. It's like, like when I got test shots of the vehicle, I thought it was like one of the coolest things because I'd never done something so big. And that was a huge tooling undertaking. And, then you get them, you're like, wow, like this thing came to life, and then when I went to China, like I went to that factory and seeing them all in production, I'm like, this is something.
Yeah. I think for us on a project like that, Chris has gone over once after I was over, and I'm sure he'll be over there numerous. I mean, we're lucky enough to have someone, he's been over to China over 40 something times. So
I missed him by like a week when I was over there.
His passport is, like stuffed with visas and stuff. So he really knows, he knows the place on the ground, where things are and stuff. And he knows the people at the factories. Make sure everything is moving along exactly the way we want.
Yeah. Yeah. People don't realize like how many people you really need to do this. It's like someone to really just communicate with the factory and someone to make sure you're costing someone who's designing. So it's like when I started this, I'm like, oh man, I had to be that one guy for everything. So now I'm like starting to bring in more people to help out with that.
Yeah. And that's another, and I get that 100%. I understand that because like for us, it was the three of us. And then as we're bringing more people in, it was nice to be able to delegate and to allow these people to do their thing and to get that taken care of and not have to worry about, getting that aspect done. It's very difficult to be a one-man operation.
Yeah.
You
can do it. It can only do it for so long. It can be done,
but right. Yeah.
If you want to expand, you got to bring in some more people.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely.
Well, Jim, thank you for your insight. It's always great talking to you about, all this fun stuff. So thank you for taking your time out to chat with me a little bit. Hopefully you guys have all enjoyed this conversation with the great Jim Preziosi of the Four Horsemen. So
I'll tell you, this was fun for me. This is
awesome.
A great opportunity. I hope you invite me back again. I'd love to come back and be on. I know you do a podcast. I'd love to be on that.
Okay. We'll get an invite your way.
But this was extremely enjoyable. And like I said, hope we do it again.
Great. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.